right, it is 7 o'clock and I can call this meeting of the Grafton Bylaw Study Committee to order. We'll begin with the, what do I want to call it? The formal announcement about a remote meeting. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, as amended by Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022. I'm not sure I really need to say that, but it's there. This meeting of the Bylaw Study Committee is being conducted with remote participation by committee members and members of the public, should any choose to attend. Remote participation by the public for any matter for which the committee allows public participation will be via the Zoom raise hand feature. If you raise your hand on Zoom, you will be enabled at an appropriate point to enter the meeting via voice or video to make a comment or ask a question. Please identify yourself by name and address for the record. And because we are all remote, every vote will be taken by roll call, and I will commence the meeting by taking a roll call of the members. Greg Marr.
Here.
Ray Mead.
Here.
Brian Langevin.
Here.
Skip Courier.
Present.
And Dave Robbins is here. Having dispensed with the formalities here, we will proceed into our agenda. The first agenda item being the stakeholder list, which we discussed a bit at the meeting last time, circulated a revised version, and we're now looking to collect together everybody's comments on that and finalize the list. Basically, the list of stakeholders that we think we are interested in getting their input on specific bylaw articles or sections. And as we noted, and as Brian's proposed letter notes, we would gladly accept comments on any section of the bylaw from anybody, but this is who we particularly want to ask. So I guess let's see, I wonder if I can figure out how to put this on the screen. We can kind of go through. If I can.
So, David, I don't think you really need to go through it. I think that's a good list. And as long as we cover in our correspondence with the various committees, the idea that, we've identified this as more probably something that you might be interested in, but feel free to toss in your 2 cents on anything else, then we're all set.
Yeah, Brian did have some suggested additions to the list, and so I will, let's see, where did I put that?
Yeah, and if I'm the only one with any suggestions, I can I could run through those too. They fall in a couple kind of larger buckets. The biggest one being, there were a few areas where I thought we could tack on the town administrator, because the individual that we had tentatively teed up is a direct report of his, and you thought that he might have some insight or some thoughts about some of those bylaws, and then a few other ticky-tack along the way, but I can run through those, Dave, if that's helpful.
Yeah, and just before you do, did anybody else have any? I mean, I just got Skip's feedback, obviously, but Skip says the list looks good. Anybody else have any suggestions for additions or changes to the list?
I've looked through it. It looks like we have pretty good coverage. Nothing that jumps out as, yeah, this is definitely needs someone else to cover it, or this is the wrong, or anything like that. So,
okay, so yeah, let's go ahead, Brian, and just go through and mention each of the ones that you're proposing to add.
Sure, I think I'll try to make it pretty quick. So the first one in Article 1, sections 6A through 6D all pertain to penalties. And I was thinking having that go off to town council could be helpful. I think the penalties section starts off by indicating that any penalty under the bylaws could require a court proceeding. And it can, with that as kind of the launching point, I thought town council might have some opinions on any of those areas.
That's good. Any disagreement?
No, I think that's good.
I should hope they were involved in that in the past already.
Fingers
Yeah.
crossed. The next group are all the ones that I was mentioning as far as the town administrator is concerned. It's Article 6, which has to do with the treasurer collector. Article 8, which has to do with the town accountant. And then Article 10, which pertains to town council. With all of those kind of feeding into the town administrator, I thought getting any thoughts Evan might have could add value.
Hmm.
Yeah, can't hurt.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me too.
Okay.
The only thought is that I think anyone, just about anyone on here would report in some way or other to the town administrator. So it might be, it might be a lot if we try to call them all out, but if there's some specific ones.
Yeah, those are the main ones that I had teed up, and I think those are areas, especially when we think of like town council, where he's responsible for the appointment, in addition to the reporting relationship.
I think there's also been some changes in like some of the town accountant and the treasurer collector area, so it may be good to just to have them
Yeah.
review those.
Yeah,
Sure.
and as we've said
What
before,
the
we'll
planning
expect the administrator to, to weigh in on anything he thinks we need to know, but
Yeah.
these are the things we want to particularly call attention to for the various reasons, either because they're mentioned in so many words in the bylaw or things that we are particularly interested in hearing, like in these articles that Brian just mentioned. I think we may be particularly interested in getting the town administrator's feedback on that.
Okay.
Oh, continue, Brian.
The next one was Article 16, dogs running at large, which I know we've already got a few folks teed up to look at this one. But I was thinking the town clerk, since she's responsible, I believe she's responsible for issuing licenses.
Yeah.
That could make sense as well.
Yep, I think seems appropriate to me.
With my town clerk's hat on, I agree.
Excellent. Yes, Skip, you are
Yeah.
speaking for the town clerk, right?
Yes, Candy and I did discuss that. There were a myriad of potential changes due to that relationship or reporting relationship.
Mm-hmm.
The next larger group are areas where I thought the Economic Development Commission could have some feedback. And so I'll list them off. And a couple of these are coming from areas where the previous iteration of the committee, I believe, had included them, or others that might be new, like the marijuana section that the EDC could have some opinions.
Yeah.
The first one was Article 21, Grafton Common Historic District and Grafton Historic District Commission. I'll just run through them all and we can chat about them. The second was Article 27, regulations relative to biomedical research. The third was Article 38, Agricultural Commission. And then 39, the limitation on number of recreational marijuana retail establishments. So those were the four I thought EDC could have some thoughts or some feedback that could be helpful.
Yeah, their perspective from speaking from an economic development perspective. Yeah, these bylaw articles do have a potential impact on the economic development. I can see where they'd be interested.
All right.
Well, that kind of goes back to what I have been saying in the past, as far as we need to stop having bylaws and other rules and regulations that affect this, aka the charter. So we've got to stop talking about things in the charter and the bylaws and not changing them at the same time. Also known as, we got to stop changing the charter without having a bylaw review committee all the time.
Yep, I remember. I got that in my notes from the last meeting. Yes. Okay. Next, Brian.
So next up, Article 23, so backtracking a little bit, sewers. I thought we could reach out to the Board of Sewer Commissioners as well. I
That
think
would be good.
we had
Granted,
DPW teed up.
yeah, granted that that's a pretty short article.
Yes.
And the sewer department used to be more of an independent department. Now it is, more or less practically a part of the DPW. But yes, the Board of Sewer Commissioners, should be queried on that. They are an important part of the sewer department.
And then winding down, Article 29, the use of Lake Ripple. We have the Recreation Commission involved in reviewing Article 22, the use of Silver Lake, and obviously Lake Ripple and Silver Lake are kind of two different animals, and Recreation runs the show over at Silver Lake. But I figured, they could, I don't know if they do run any programming on occasion at Lake Ripple, but there could at least be the potential there. So
Yeah,
I
I
thought we
think-
might loop them
Right.
in.
I agree. It would be worth getting their view on the use of Lake Ripple bylaw.
And then my last one, I did have one more for the town administrator, Article 40, pertaining to revolving accounts. We had that teed up for finance director. I thought the town administrator, obviously with the implementation of the new accounting software and things like that, he could have some additional feedback to offer.
Yeah, I know that is mostly of interest to the finance director, but yeah, I think the town administrator, ought to be asked if he sees anything that needs to be done there.
That was all I had.
All right, so without, unless there's anything further, I will proceed to, add these items from Brian's recommendations onto the master list here, and then we'll, we'll work from there. So are we good on that?
Yep, good on that. Yeah.
Sure.
All right. Moving right along then. The next agenda item was the memo to be sent to stakeholders asking for recommendations, and Brian has drafted actually a pair of memos, a sort of an introductory memo along with the outlines, for lack of a better term, of an email to be sent. So on those two things, everybody had a chance to read through those? Have any suggestions?
I think it's very, very well written, so. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
All right, yeah. And so, yeah, on the email, the draft email template, let's see. Oh, okay. Yeah, I was looking at the bullet list there with a couple of dots in it, and that would appear to me to be the place to insert the list of bylaw articles or sections for the respective agencies. So basically what we'll end up having to do, I'd send out a sample, an Excel spreadsheet that is derived from the list that we just completed, and it comes out. And I don't know exactly what form would be best, but we'll figure that out. We had discussed having this sent out via the town administrator's office, so we'll have to work with. Basically, we have to put together. I think I counted. Let me see if I don't suppose is there any chance I actually wrote that down somewhere? Trying to remember how many stakeholders I counted. I think there was something like 41 of them.
Makes sense, seeing as how there's 41 articles.
Yep.
Or
Just counted up
27
27.
spreadsheet.
Anyway, well, I'm not too worried about the exact number so much as we just need to put together a separate email for each stakeholder to be sent out, and count on the town administrator's office to know to whom specifically that should be sent. I did something, went through a similar exercise last fall with the Open Space and Recreation Committee, where we had to, we sent out a proposed list of action item assignments, and I had to identify the email address of every one of the responsible agencies at the time. I have some of those, but I don't have all of them. But I think it's easy enough for us to ask the town administrator's office to assemble this information and get the email sent out. So if we're good with the letters here and the emails, and I can put those together with an updated list of what articles we'll ask each stakeholder about, and we'll see if we can't put that together and get Evan to send that out for us, or Evan and his staff.
I noticed there are still some unincorporated changes, and that's mentioned in one of the letters. Do we know when we'd have a new one available, or have those been sent off to the state to review?
I'm going to guess that, without taking the time to look it up, I'm going to guess that we're waiting for the AG's office to respond with their letters.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the response I had gotten back from Candy when I asked her a month or so ago, when we I think right around the time that I think Skip was able to get his hands on the Word version of the bylaws. She had said that they were still out, but I didn't get an estimate timeline when we expected to hear back.
Yeah, I think the Attorney General has something like 90 days from the time it's submitted to them to respond. Let's see. Yeah, the last AG response letter we received and posted to the town website is from last year, from the October town meeting. So yeah, the bylaws themselves are a bit of a moving target, and we'll have to take that into account as we proceed with our work, as there may be additional bylaw changes made this fall and next spring, even before our final report goes. So we're going to have to kind of keep up with that. But I think, by and large, we ought to be able, most of the stakeholders ought to be able to review the sections of interest and get back to us with their comments, even if, and quite possibly if any one of them is actually looking at a section that's going to be for which we've already voted an update, they're likely to be aware of it.
Well, Dave, that kind of makes my point, which is we shouldn't be changing the bylaws if we're considering a change in the charter. And do we really have to make changes in both?
Yeah. Fortunately, right now, I don't think we have any charter changes in the works. But yeah, and we change bylaws at just about every town meeting, so that's always a bit of a moving target. But just something for our work, we have to kind of take that, and we just have to deal with it, basically.
Well, really, what I'm kind of asking is, why do we work on the bylaws and the charter? Should the stuff that's covered in the charter be covered in the bylaws as well?
Generally not. There are some things where the charter gives the general overview and then leaves the specifics to the bylaws, such as the charter sets town meeting, but the date and time are specified in the bylaws, presumably because the bylaws are easier to adjust than the charter.
Yeah, I think one point, Skip, that sort of sticks in my mind from what you said is that if the charter says everything that needs to be said, we may not need to repeat it in the bylaws.
Correct. That's my point.
Yeah. And so that's one thing that we can kind of look at as we're reviewing the bylaws. one thing to keep in mind is, does the bylaw really need to be there for this, or does that really need to say this? Does the charter do a good enough job? Yeah, and sometimes that may be the case, and largely the charter sort of spells out and spells out some things, and then it says it delegates to the bylaws more of the details, which is okay. And occasionally when we change the charter, that change requires a change in the bylaws to remain consistent. So there's always that dependency. But yeah, to go back to that one point though, is if the charter says everything that needs to be said, avoiding unnecessary duplication is a good idea. Yeah, and that's sort of something that, independent of our stakeholder review, that's one of a number of items that we as a committee can kind of look at, along with the list I've been developing. Part of it's a stakeholder list, but I've also, as I've been going through the bylaws, taking a lot of notes myself on things that, questions come up that come into my head when I'm looking at the bylaw. And at some point in the not too distant future, we will probably all be spending some time discussing things that we've seen in the bylaws that we think may need to doing. So
I think this is adjusting from the time that we were governed by bylaws and statutes to when we adopted the charter.
yeah.
And we've got to get rid of a lot of stuff.
Yes, right. Yeah, right. There may be things in the bylaw that are still there from the time when we didn't have a charter.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I might hope that some of the previous bylaw study committees have kind of looked at that, but I can't be. I wouldn't say 100% sure about that. So it's worthwhile looking for that. All right. So, having said all that, are we good to go on the stakeholder memo? I'll follow up with the town administrator's office on, getting the mechanics of that worked out so the memo can actually get sent out.
The only other piece I wanted to point out, and if you want to address this with the town administrator, feel free, or I could reach out to William as well if that's easier. I know at this week's select board meeting, when William was going through the town website updates, and it seemed like they're marching towards a deadline of the website being fairly final by around September, and then having about a month or so before it really goes live to push through any final changes. So we might be looking at a new website externally available by about the middle of October or so.
Yes.
So I would just be sensitive to, if any of these links that we're including in the email might change, or if there's a way for them to keep the links consistent across that migration. That would be helpful if folks haven't had a chance to respond to the letters yet.
Yes, that's a good point to keep in mind. I am aware of the website transition in progress, and spending some time talking with William about that through the IT committee. Just had some new stuff on that today. But along with, I need to make a note of that to myself. Along with that, there's I think this more falls under the the topic of discussing our next steps. But I've been thinking about some ideas about how we might use our section of the website, our committee section of the website, to make the information available to the public and to receive public input and comments. But as I was thinking about that, I realized it's probably best not to try to do that right now because of the website transition. And I was actually talking to William about that briefly this afternoon, and he and I kind of agreed that once the new website is up, we can set up our committee's portion of the website to be able to interact with the public in however exactly we want to do that.
Sure.
So that's certainly in my it's entered into my mind, and that's something I would like us to work out as we move forward. So, but that's a good point, Brian, on the question of the document links in the stakeholder memo. Yeah, okay, moving on then. The next agenda item, we touched on the topic briefly at the last meeting. Our deadline is the October 16th, 2023 town meeting. And so, we talked a bit about trying to plan our schedule so that we get everything done in time. And I don't really have a lot more information on that at the moment. I had been making some notes and need to get some ideas of what are the various interim deadlines we need to meet, like giving town council time to review the proposed changes. We need to have something ready for the finance committee's hearings on the warrant in October. And I don't remember exactly when I think their hearings are typically 2 or 3 weeks before town meeting. I don't know if you remember off the top of your head, Greg.
Give them 60 days, they're lazy.
I thought I got 2 finance committee members on here now.
That's right.
But yeah, so we'll need to check up on things like the deadline for submitting warrant articles, the finance committee public hearing, time for town council to review, time for us to do our work. I guess I don't really have anything much more concrete on that at the moment. But
Yeah, our next finance committee meeting is the week of September 11th. So I think that gives us the rough time frame for the October meeting next year. Is first couple weeks of September is when the finance committee public hearing is done. So then, and the warrant is probably being opened in the next week or two.
Yeah, I think the last meeting, I know we had talked about potentially including something of a timeline in the stakeholder outreach. I intentionally kept things a little vague, and obviously I don't want to go backwards in the agenda, but if there's any feedback there, we could certainly tweak things. But my thought process was really just kind of highlighting, asking for responses back by the middle of October. And then, commenting that we would hope to be able to review responses and discuss potential changes by early next year. What was in the back of my mind was if we could really kind of get things teed up so that right around the time of the Springtown meeting, we're really, starting to wrap up a lot of our work. That would kind of give council the bulk of the summer to get through what they need to get through. And I would hope even in a worst case scenario, that should be more than enough time. And then, leave it sounds like we need a month and a half at most, maybe for finance committee to do their thing. But that's kind of what was going through my mind with some of those timelines.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. For the stakeholder memo going out, probably within the next week or so, gives everybody about roughly 2 months, 7 or 8 weeks to respond. And I think that's about right. I mean, some people are going to be able to respond right away, but some of these committees may only meet once a month. And so, if you give them a couple of meeting cycles to get the questions out there to the committee members and get them to meet and discuss and give us some feedback, I think a couple months is about right for that. And then in between, I'm sure I have some notes somewhere on some of the more details about schedules of events leading up to town meeting. I have lots of documents on my computer, and sometimes it's hard to
Dave,
find.
Dave, are we
Dave,
going to have public hearings to get public input? I know that anybody can attend our meetings, but
Yeah.
So are we going to hold public hearings on potential changes, or?
I think so. I think we talked about that. I think we talked about that a bit at the last meeting. That it would be a good idea, even whether we call them formal public hearings or just call them public meetings. It
Public
almost
meetings,
doesn't
yeah.
matter what we call them.
Yep.
I think it's a good idea to have one or maybe more than one
Yeah.
meeting in a session where we basically invite the public in. We can talk about what we've been thinking, but but perhaps more importantly, ask the public for their ideas. I mean, it's sort of a back and forth because, you know, the public may have some thoughts about what we've been thinking about. The public may have some ideas that we hadn't thought of, all of which would be good for us to, yeah, so at least one, maybe more than one public meeting.
Okay.
I think we don't have to work out an exact schedule, but just knowing that we have that in mind would be good. In fact, I'm just found one of the list I was working on the other day without, you know, some of the things that I had thought of that we have to include in our schedule leading up to the final is I did have a note for one or more public meetings. And there is a deadline. There's a deadline for putting articles on a warrant, which is 45 days before the meeting. Although I think that deadline is often taken to apply mainly to citizen petitions, because other boards and committees and departments, you know, tend to throw things onto the warrant almost at the last minute. It's right up until the time the select board decides to close the warrant. So I think the 45-day deadline is not necessarily something that affects us.
Yeah, I think it's specifically for citizens petitions.
Yeah. But yeah, there's some, you know, some additional details I should be able to dig up about you know, some of the schedule items that we do need to pay attention to. And more generally, I think we're off to a good start here. I agree with Brian, what Brian proposed in the stakeholder memo, asking for feedback by October 14th, and then
Yep.
sort of generally discussing you know, where we want to go from there.
That and constantly asking for public input by posting these meetings as we go along. Kind of addresses what Ray had asked about. So we just kind of have anybody wants to talk about any of these things and shows up at the meeting, they can raise their hand and ask a question.
Yep.
There's
we might-
20,000 people that might have a good idea here, so what the heck?
Yep. Yeah, we might want to schedule some of our meetings in person rather than by Zoom. Just for that purpose, to give people a way to
Chance to attend.
walk in.
Yep.
Yep.
And
Some
Dave, I
people like to attend by Zoom, other people like to go into the meeting room.
I think it might have been in our first meeting, we were talking about potentially adding as a standing agenda item, you know, public comment, just so if I feel like, you know, without that, even if it's not taken advantage of in most of our meetings, without that, you know, we could be lacking for a place to solicit that feedback if and when somebody does show up to a meeting. They'd have to kind of, you know, shoehorn themselves into another agenda item if we don't have that sort of standing item.
Yeah, no, that's a good thing to have. I haven't been including it in our agenda so far, but I had in mind that you know, once we get slightly farther into the process, you know, we should you know, we should provide every opportunity that we can for public comment. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about getting ourselves on the new website, you know, in a way that people can use to see what we're working on and to comment on it. You know, they have this for a lot of other boards and committees. They have a place right there on the website for you to click to submit a comment, and I'm anticipating us doing something like that. Just as a sort of a side note, we have, as you know, we have an email list for this committee, and the thought crossed my mind to create a separate email list specifically for public comments.
We
Just
talked
so
about
that,
that last time.
so I
Well,
can.
Mr. Chair, at this time, that I would say that you should always feel free to take public comment regardless of what the agenda says.
Depending on the committee.
Yeah, I know. So
Exactly.
some other committees I'm on, we do include on our agendas, we always include typically as the first agenda item, public comment. And that's something that we, you know, maybe even for our next meeting, now that we've talked about it a bit, and I sort of think it's a bit early in our process to
Yeah, I
take
think
public
so.
comment, but not really. I mean, I have informally received comments from the public individually and taken notes on that. So it's probably never too early to get some ideas from the public. So with that, yeah, we'll maybe try to nail down some more details on our work schedule. I'll dig up some more information as to what, what are the fairly hard deadlines we have to work with. And we'll just kind of proceed from there. The next agenda
Well,
item.
Dave,
Yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
at this time, the idea of giving them a couple of months to respond and then following up with the different stakeholders that haven't responded isn't really something that we have to worry about running up against our far-end deadline. So I think that's kind of what we were talking about at the last meeting was when are we actually tasked with coming back with something, and that's next October. So giving them a couple of months to actually meet, assimilate what Brian's drafted to send out, and not responding, which was a problem in the past with bylaw review committees, is the issue that we have to address with that particular item.
Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah, sometimes trying to extract a response from somebody is like herding cats or pulling teeth. Yeah, I had a bit of that problem with my Open Space and Recreation Committee action item assignments. Some people didn't respond. I think I ended up sending the request out twice, at least to some committees. I did end up getting most of them to respond. And I said, well, if you don't respond, I'll assume you're okay with the jobs we've assigned to you. And that's not really a good assumption to make, because people will always come back and say, hey, I object to that. Well, you didn't object to it when you had the opportunity. Yeah, our case is slightly different. It's more like, well, you wanted that bylaw changed. Why didn't you tell me? We gave you an opportunity to tell us. So we'll see how that goes. And we may need to be a bit of a pest with some of these stakeholders, but that's what it takes.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I mean, if anybody, really refuses to get back to us, I don't see it holding up the committee's work. The
No.
committee can always proceed with the best information we have, and there's enough of these articles where we're reaching out to multiple parties as it is. So we'll likely get feedback from somebody, and then this isn't the only crack at the apple. I think it's the most efficient process to kind of hack everything and include everything in our scope. But if there's some sort of change that they wanted to push through that doesn't get in next October with what we're proposing, they could bring it to a town meeting whenever suits them.
Oh yeah, we can change bylaws at every town meeting.
Right.
So,
We don't, our committee is not one that every bylaw change has to go through this committee to be approved. It doesn't work quite that way. We may want it to, except I wouldn't want to be a permanent bylaw committee that has to review every single bylaw change.
It used to be, and that's why I got involved in this.
All righty, so I did have an agenda item called next steps, which sort of open-ended, but there was one thing, one question came up at the last meeting, which I wanted to address here, and that was whether the town had anything like a Google Drive or Dropbox account or something that we could use to share documents. The short answer to that is no, the town doesn't have anything set up like that. The slightly longer answer is, for now, we've been sharing documents by email, and that's okay. In conjunction with the website upgrade or transition or whatever you want to call it, I may have mentioned this earlier in the evening with other discussions about the website, but I've been thinking partly in terms of how we could structure the website to sort of serve two purposes. One is collecting information for our use at meetings, and the other is for making information visible to the public in a useful way. Those are similar but not quite identical, because every document that we discuss at a meeting is a public record. And I know what we've done on the planning board is we have a web page of meeting materials for every meeting. And in that meeting materials webpage, then we have links to the various documents. The select board has something comparable. They put all the meeting documents together in one PDF, and that's a meeting packet, which to me is cumbersome to use. I don't like scrolling through 200-page PDFs, but
It does get to be a pain. You know, because you have this, you know, you get a license renewal or something like that.
yeah,
It's 40 pages and it's just,
Yeah.
you know, it's unfortunate. But now I brought this up at a goals meeting, Dave, about probably maybe a year ago about creating a shared drive for everybody, because, you know, sometimes there's, especially being on the board, there's issues that you want to look at a lease, or you want to look at a contract, or you want to look at this. And, you know, we have to go through the town administrator's office to get that. But if we had a shared drive, and I think that's what you're talking about, that anybody could access. So this committee would have a portion of that shared drive that we could all, you know, all the documents could be on it. That was discussed. I don't think it's gone anywhere, but it was discussed.
yeah, I think, you know, there's sort of a, you know, it's an interesting, it's a need, clearly. I think that, you know, to be able to effectively share documents, and while we can do that by email, that's a bit cumbersome.
It is.
It would be better if the documents were just there, you know, whether it's a shared drive or a place on the town website where you can get to the documents. You know, in principle, what you're talking about, what we're talking about, is a place to put documents so that we can, you know, we can all read the same documents. The public can read the documents, unless of course they're not public documents, but that's a whole different thing that we don't need to worry about right now. But yeah, a place to read documents, and it's really, like I said, there's two similar but not identical purposes. One is for us to, you know, have access to the material that we need to look at. The other is for the public to see what we're working on. And yeah, I do want to follow up. I've been making a few notes on that, trying to figure out what at least I think might be a workable path forward. But yeah, I don't know that I was aware, Ray, that you guys had talked about it previously. But it's
Yep.
That just tells me that, you know, I'm not the only one who thinks it's a good idea.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, you know, the companies that I've worked for, I mean, you know, in construction, you know, you had documents that were on a shared drive, and then,
Oh yeah,
you know, the PM could look at it, and you know, the GC could get to it, depending on what it was. But it's invaluable, I mean, to have a shared drive.
yeah.
So I'll toss in 2 cents worth on this, Dave, and Greg might be a little more fluent in this based on my correspondence with him about being spammed by various emails.
Mhm.
I see the smile, or Brian perhaps, but we do have a capability to remote into different applications at the town, because I pay bills for Nelson Park, and I do payroll for Nelson Park remotely. Somewhere, somebody with IT experience has got to be able to get us access, or there's got to be a way to get access to the town's mainframe system remotely. This came from my question about following up with people who had not responded to our requests for feedback for the different there are sections of the bylaws, and, you know, when are you going to respond to us, so that we could see whether somebody had actually responded and be up to date with the documentation that we might have. That's got to exist someplace. It's just whether we're going to pay for it. I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, there's, you know, there are a few, a few technical details to be, figured out, but one of the things that we have to, one of the values of having a shared, a truly, shared documents on a shared, whether it's a Google Drive or something else, is, one of the things that's often useful in sort of, in other worlds, like the, even, the construction world or a lot of the commercial world, is that a shared document that we can all sort of work together on updating it. However, the open meeting law says that would not be a good idea for us, because if we're sitting there in between meetings, Greg updates the document, I look at it, I update it, update it further. Brian sees something, oh, I think it should be this way. That becomes a deliberation in violation of the open
Oh,
meeting.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so completely sort of sort of a completely, relatively open access to, shared document storage, can run into problems with the open meeting law. So it would have to be more controlled than that.
You'd almost want
Plus,
something with read-only rights, so that.
Yeah, read only, yeah.
yeah, so if you, and so that's kind of the direction that I've been thinking, without worrying about exactly where that's done, whether it's done through the website or through some other application. The direction I've been heading in my thinking is that putting there has to be a certain amount of, for lack of a better term, control over, who gets to put documents up there and what happens to them. How do we avoid? There's a certain amount of avoiding open meeting law violations. A certain amount of that is just our own discipline, which we have to think about. Whether we're exchanging documents by email or any other means, we have to be aware of our responsibilities regarding deliberation in between meetings. But other than that, the question really becomes, how do the documents get there, and who's the gatekeeper for that? Some town boards and committees have staff that can do that for them. Staff that puts together a meeting packet, or staff that manages the planning board's meeting materials page. A lot of other committees don't have any staff support, so there's that becomes a concern, and I don't know how to resolve that. You could, there may be more than one technical approach to that, which we don't need to try to solve tonight, but aside from technical issues, the idea of being able to share documents efficiently is something that I think we probably all want to pursue one way or another. So beyond that sort of rambling discussion, is there any, what do we think we want to do at our next meeting?
I should think that we might want to start, because it's 6 or 8 weeks before any other board or committee might want to respond, with our own suggestions about changing bylaws.
Yep.
Not having committees respond to us by then.
Yeah, right. So we don't have to sit back and wait for them to respond. I imagine many, if not all of us, already have some ideas about things that we think need work. So yeah, so let's spend let's get started on that at our next meeting.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
I've
that sounds good.
gotten a fair way through it. There's still a bunch more I need to look at, and I got some questions out to Candy. She's looking into. There's
Yep.
some
So,
inconsistencies in one of the bylaws that I think was just an editorial thing. But she was looking into that.
And Dave, both for our own benefit and then for any public participation that they'd want to come along with, would you envision, teeing off a certain number of articles per meeting and having a meeting dedicated to, articles 1 through 5 or something like that, so that, we know in advance and the public would know if they want to chime in on something in advance, which articles we'd be planning on diving into, or would it just depend on, Greg wants to suggest something on Article 2. I want to talk about something in Article 4. What would you think?
I think maybe for our next meeting, we can just sort of, leave it kind of, you know, ad hoc, and whatever we want to talk about. But as we move forward, it probably will become worthwhile to, you know, narrow down the topics at a given meeting to a specific number of bylaw articles.
Yeah.
I don't know that I want to start out that way, but I think as we go along, we're gonna get a feel for, you know, how much interest there is in particular bylaws, and we may find that we want to group them either by article number or by subject matter.
Yeah, I think it's probably something good to do after we get the town feedback, the boards and committees, and see where the big areas are.
I tend to agree with that. The wild west for the first 6 months or so, and then start to limit people's ability to have feedback. That might be thinking way ahead. Maybe nobody's going to be interested in this. Who knows? But we haven't looked at this for what, 15 years?
20.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we ought to at least plan for the possibility that we will get a lot of public interest. You know, that might not come about, but if we don't plan, if we plan on not getting any public interest, then, you know, we may have trouble dealing with it if we do get it.
Yeah, that Murphy guy will come back and bite us in the butt.
What is the saying? Hope for the best, plan for the worst.
No, unfortunately, the bylaws, people really don't think about them or care about them much unless they affect them.
This
So
is true.
that's when people, you know, have opinions and get up in arms about something. But you know, I think we should go through them and pick out the ones that we want to, you know, that we want to discuss and that we have ideas on, and because there's the other ones that we're never going to change. So
Yeah. Okay, so we'll plan on the next meeting. We'll really focus on getting started collecting our own ideas about what bylaw work needs to be done.
yep, sounds great.
Sounds like a plan then. And our next agenda item is to review the minutes of the July 21st meeting as distributed by Brian.
I move we accept the minutes as distributed by Mr. Langevin.
Second,
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Any comments on the minutes? Any suggestions for changes?
one note, while we do roll call votes, if the vote is unanimous, you do not have to list the roll call in the minutes. You can just,
That is correct. And I will say, you know, the minutes are perhaps more detailed than I generally see in minutes, but there's nothing wrong. There's really no hard and fast rule. And as a minimum, the minutes need to list the topics discussed and the votes taken.
Yep, that's it.
And we don't generally expect minutes to be a transcript of the meeting. But Brian's minutes do not qualify as a transcript of the meeting. They are more detailed than I typically see, but I don't have a problem with that.
Nope.
Father
So-
Robbins has said, "Nice job, my son."
All right, let's call for a vote. If there's no further discussion.
Mr.
vote on
Chair,
the-
yeah, the only other piece I wanted to throw out there was, since we don't have meeting packets, and right now, you know, until we figure out potentially something on the website, we don't have any other, you know, way to kind of make publicly available documents that we might be using in a meeting. Like obviously we've referenced a few tonight. What I did with the one example that I thought we had in the last meeting was I attached it as an exhibit to the minutes. Is that something that the committee would like me to continue doing in similar situations until we have some, you know, place on the website for some of those documents?
I believe
I
that
will
is,
say it's not necessary. Officially, the minutes need to identify the documents that were discussed at the meeting. The minutes do not need to include the documents. By identifying the documents, it is assumed that the documents are available somewhere. And so for some committees, some other committees I'm on, you know, we've never really posted the documents themselves anywhere, but we all keep the documents are available. Ideally, they should be available at the town clerk's office. But I don't, you know, unless the documents are exorbitantly long, there's really no harm including them as attachments to the minutes. And I'm just saying, you can do that, but you're not required to.
And so, given that, does the committee have a preference?
In other words, nice job.
Yeah.
I think the material that we use today, since it is not posted, would make sense to include in the minutes.
Yeah, generally speaking, and I think, generally speaking, at least for now, we've sort of, I think we've all agreed that our objective would be to have all these materials posted on the website or somewhere so that the public can see them. But until that happens, attaching them to minutes sounds like something we're all comfortable with. That said, with no further discussion on the minutes, I'll put that to a roll call vote. Greg Marr,
Aye.
Ray Mead,
Aye.
Brian Langevin,
Aye.
Skip Courier,
Yes.
and Dave Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously.